The undersea fiber optic network connecting northern Europe operated at normal capacity. On October 3, 2024, telecommunications engineers monitored data traffic flowing through submarine cables beneath the Baltic Sea with the routine precision that keeps internet connectivity stable across nations. Hundreds of terabits per second moved through fiber strands thinner than human hair, buried in cables lying on the seabed between Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. Network operations centers tracked latency, packet loss, and routing stability. Nothing indicated that signals were being systematically degraded through carefully targeted interference. The first indication appeared as a minor latency increase that fell within normal operational variance. At 04:23 UTC, network monitoring systems detected a 7-millisecond increase in round-trip time for traffic traversing the Sea Lion 1 cable connecting Helsinki to Rostock. The deviation remained well below the threshold that would trigger automatic failover to alternative routes. Engineers who reviewed the automated alert classified it as potential signal degradation from natural seabed movement or thermal variations in the cable environment. The latency stabilized within 12 minutes. The incident logged as routine variance requiring no immediate action, but the pattern was expanding. Over the next 16 hours, similar anomalies appeared across multiple submarine cable systems in the Baltic region. The BCS East-West Interlink reported brief signal attenuation. The Baltic Sea cable experienced unexplained packet loss spikes. The Sweden-Lithuania cable logged intermittent performance degradation. Each event appeared isolated. Different cables, different times, different technical characteristics. The incidents remained below thresholds that would trigger coordinated investigation because submarine cables operated through separate commercial entities with independent monitoring systems. At 2047 UTC, the pattern became impossible to ignore. 8 major submarine cables simultaneously experienced signal degradation severe enough to trigger automatic traffic rerouting. The failures appeared in coordinated sequence, starting from cables near the Finnish coast and propagating southward toward Poland in less than 9 minutes. Network operations centers across northern Europe initiated emergency protocols. Internet traffic remained functional. Redundant cable systems and automatic routing ensured continued connectivity. But the simultaneous degradation of multiple independent submarine cables indicated something beyond equipment failure or natural interference. The European Telecommunications Network Operators Association activated its Crisis Coordination Center. What looked like scattered technical problems was revealing itself as systematic sabotage. The submarine cables weren't experiencing random failures, they were being deliberately targeted. Every major internet connection between Northern Europe and the rest of the continent depended on these undersea fiber networks. When multiple cables failed simultaneously, traffic concentrated on remaining routes, creating congestion that degraded performance even for systems not directly affected. The cascading effect threatened to overwhelm backup capacity and create widespread connectivity failures. Technical teams began reconstructing the attack timeline. The signal interference had been active for at least 18 hours before the simultaneous degradation event made the pattern visible. During that period, cables had experienced progressive performance degradation that appeared consistent with environmental interference or equipment aging. The attackers had been testing response thresholds, introducing graduated signal loss to map how network systems reacted and what degradation levels triggered automated failover protocols. Analysis teams identified the sabotage methodology within 7 hours of full alert status. The attack didn't involve physically cutting cables. It exploited acoustic interference that degraded fiber optic signal transmission. Specialized equipment positioned near submarine cables generated precisely calibrated acoustic waves that created microscopic vibrations in fiber strands. These vibrations introduced signal noise that reduced transmission quality without completely severing connectivity. The technique was sophisticated enough to affect buried cables without requiring direct physical access. The technical analysis revealed alarming precision. Rather than applying uniform interference across all cables, the operation introduced graduated degradation designed to force traffic onto specific routes. The attackers had mapped the entire submarine cable network architecture and calculated which combination of cable degradations would create maximum congestion on remaining systems. The geographic coordination suggested detailed understanding of cable locations, routing protocols, and failover mechanisms. If the operation had continued undetected for another 11 hours, it would have intersected with morning peak internet usage when business operations, financial markets, and government communications generated maximum traffic loads. The combination of degraded cable capacity and peak demand would have exceeded the network's ability to route traffic effectively. Internet connectivity for 48 million people across 7 countries would have experienced severe slowdowns or intermittent failures lasting up to 18 hours. While engineers worked to diagnose and address the interference, the cascade modeling revealed the scale of what had been narrowly avoided. Northern European economies depended on continuous internet connectivity for financial services, logistics coordination, healthcare systems, and government operations. The affected region processed approximately 3.7 trillion euros in digital transactions daily through banking networks, payment platforms, and financial exchanges. An 11-hour connectivity degradation during business hours would have forced transaction delays, trading suspensions, and settlement failures that would have propagated through global financial networks. The consequences extended beyond financial systems. Cloud computing services hosted in the region provided infrastructure for 270,000 businesses across Europe. Connectivity degradation would have disrupted access to critical business applications, halted e-commerce operations, and prevented remote work for millions of employees. The economic impact calculations indicated losses exceeding 12 billion euros from a single day of severe internet disruption, with additional costs from delayed recovery and extended business interruption. Healthcare infrastructure represented another critical vulnerability. Modern medical systems relied on internet connectivity for electronic health records, telemedicine consultations, diagnostic imaging transmission, and coordination between hospitals. The affected region included 340 major hospitals serving approximately 180,000 patients daily. Connectivity disruption would have forced reversion to paper-based processes, delayed diagnostic procedures requiring remote specialist consultation, and complicated care coordination for complex cases requiring input from multiple facilities. Emergency services would have faced compounded challenges. Police, fire, and medical dispatch systems depended on internet connectivity for computer-aided dispatch, resource coordination, and interagency communication. A connectivity degradation event affecting these systems would have increased emergency response times by an estimated 6 to 11 minutes on average. Delays that translated to measurable increases in preventable deaths and property losses during fire and medical emergencies. The National Security Agency had been tracking the submarine cable interference since 0840 UTC, more than 12 hours before telecommunications operators recognized the coordinated pattern. The initial detection came from underwater acoustic monitoring systems that identified unusual low-frequency emissions near known cable routes. The acoustic signatures matched theoretical models of fiber optic interference techniques, but had never been detected in operational deployment. Within 6 hours, NSA analysts had mapped the interference sources, identified the acoustic generation equipment, and begun coordinating with European partners on neutralization strategy. The challenge wasn't just stopping the interference, it was doing so without creating additional disruptions to already stressed networks. The submarine cables had automatically rerouted traffic to compensate for degraded routes, and abruptly restoring full capacity could cause routing instabilities as network systems adjusted back to normal configurations. The countermeasure deployment began at 0320 UTC. Naval vessels moved to positions above the identified interference sources and deployed acoustic jamming systems designed to suppress the cable interference equipment. The jamming operations required precise calibration. Too much acoustic energy would damage the cables themselves, while too little would allow the interference to persist. Simultaneously, telecommunications operators prepared to manage traffic shifts as cable capacity returned to normal. The restoration process required coordinated naval operations across international waters. The interference sources had been positioned in areas where maritime jurisdiction overlapped or remained ambiguous, complicating rapid response. Diplomatic coordination preceded the countermeasure deployment to ensure that naval operations wouldn't create international incidents while addressing the communications sabotage. By 0950 UTC, submarine cable networks had returned to normal performance. Signal quality monitoring showed stable transmission across all affected routes. Network operations centers verified that automatic routing had successfully redistributed traffic back to primary cable systems. Telecommunications authorities issued advisories regarding enhanced monitoring procedures and accelerated deployment of additional interference detection capabilities. The immediate crisis had been contained, but the vulnerability remained. The investigation revealed additional troubling details. The acoustic interference equipment had been positioned along cable routes for at least 23 days before activation, gathering data about cable locations, signal characteristics, and traffic patterns. This reconnaissance period allowed the operators to calibrate their interference for maximum effectiveness and minimum detectability. The deployment timing, late evening before business hours, was clearly chosen to allow signal degradation to accumulate overnight and create maximum impact during morning peak usage. The geographic targeting demonstrated sophisticated understanding of telecommunications infrastructure. The affected cables represented critical connectivity links for countries that had recently invested in digital infrastructure to reduce dependence on routes through third-party nations. Disrupting these cables would have demonstrated vulnerabilities in the new infrastructure and created political pressure regarding telecommunications independence strategies. The operation also highlighted cascading vulnerabilities in digital infrastructure. Internet connectivity failures don't just affect individual users, they cascade through interconnected systems. Financial markets require connectivity for trading operations. Supply chains depend on digital coordination for inventory management and logistics. Government services rely on internet access for citizen interactions and interagency coordination. The compounding effect of these disruptions extends recovery timelines from hours to days. European telecommunications authorities and the NSA conducted extensive analysis of the interference methodology and deployment patterns. The technical fingerprints showed innovations beyond previous submarine cable attacks, specifically the acoustic interference approach that avoided physical damage while degrading performance. This suggested either capability advancement by known threat actors or new operators with specialized expertise in undersea communications vulnerabilities. The incident triggered comprehensive reviews of submarine cable security across the telecommunications sector. Cable operators accelerated deployment of enhanced acoustic monitoring systems that could detect interference sources more rapidly. Naval authorities increased surveillance of waters near critical cable routes. International bodies began discussions on establishing clearer protocols for responding to submarine cable sabotage in areas where maritime jurisdiction remained contested. But the fundamental vulnerability persisted. Submarine cables carried approximately 99% of intercontinental internet traffic, making them critical infrastructure with limited redundancy. The cables lay on the seabed in known locations that sophisticated actors could map and target. The acoustic interference technique demonstrated that cables could be degraded without physical cutting, an approach that was harder to detect and attribute than conventional sabotage methods. The behavioral analysis revealed concerning operational characteristics. The 23-day reconnaissance period demonstrated patience that exceeded typical cyber attack timelines. Most network attacks sought immediate impact through data theft or ransomware deployment. This operation showed different characteristics: prolonged observation, careful calibration of interference parameters, and targeting that would maximize economic and political impact rather than direct financial gain. Geopolitical analysts noted the strategic implications. Submarine cable networks represented critical infrastructure that conventional military operations couldn't easily defend or rapidly repair. A successful attack creating sustained connectivity disruption would undermine confidence in digital infrastructure and create political pressure during a period of existing tensions regarding technology sovereignty and internet governance. Economic security authorities conducted modeling to assess resilience against future cable attacks. The simulations tested scenarios where interference affected larger numbers of cables, targeted different geographic regions, or coordinated with other infrastructure disruptions. The results showed that existing response protocols assumed isolated cable failures from accidental damage, not coordinated attacks across multiple systems. The recovery mechanisms that worked for ship anchor strikes or natural disasters would be overwhelmed by simultaneous sabotage of numerous cables. The insurance and telecommunications industries began reassessing risk models for submarine cable attacks. Previous models had treated cable damage as operational risks related to shipping accidents or natural seabed events. The demonstrated capability to systematically degrade multiple cables through acoustic interference required new risk categories. Several insurers announced they would require enhanced security measures for critical cable routes. International law specialists debated the legal frameworks applicable to submarine cable sabotage. The attacks occurred in international waters and areas of contested maritime jurisdiction, complicating attribution and response options. Existing maritime law addressed cable protection primarily in the context of accidental damage, with limited provisions for deliberate sabotage. The legal ambiguities created challenges for coordinating defensive operations and deterring future attacks. Technology companies dependent on submarine cable connectivity reviewed their business continuity plans. Cloud service providers examined their ability to maintain operations during extended connectivity disruptions. Financial institutions tested backup communication systems designed for cable failure scenarios. The exercises revealed gaps in redundancy planning. Many organizations had prepared for localized outages but lacked protocols for regional-scale connectivity degradation. Research institutions studying telecommunications infrastructure identified fundamental tensions between efficiency and resilience. Modern submarine cable networks optimized for capacity and cost-effectiveness, which meant concentrating traffic on relatively few high-capacity routes rather than maintaining extensive redundancy. This efficiency left limited buffer to absorb disruptions. Building more resilient networks with additional cables and diverse routing would significantly increase costs that telecommunications companies struggled to justify to shareholders. The technical community developed improved detection mechanisms for submarine cable interference. The acoustic sabotage had evaded standard monitoring because it mimicked environmental noise patterns. The new detection approaches used pattern recognition to identify coordinated interference across multiple cable systems. Recognizing that simultaneous anomalies at geographically distributed cables indicated deliberate attack rather than natural phenomena. Environmental monitoring programs revealed unintended consequences of the naval countermeasure operations. The acoustic jamming used to suppress the interference equipment had affected marine life in the operational areas, particularly species sensitive to low-frequency sound. The incident highlighted challenges in developing defensive technologies that could protect critical infrastructure without creating environmental damage, a balance that would complicate future response operations. Marine biology research institutions documented behavioral changes in whale populations that migrated through the affected areas during the jamming operations. The acoustic countermeasures operated at frequencies that overlapped with cetacean communication ranges. The incident demonstrated that cable defense operations required environmental impact assessment in addition to technical effectiveness evaluation. The diplomatic aftermath created tensions between nations regarding responsibility for cable security. Countries hosting cable landing stations argued that protection in international waters exceeded their jurisdictional authority. The incident exposed gaps in international cooperation frameworks for protecting shared telecommunications infrastructure. Telecommunications operators began lobbying for international treaties, specifically addressing submarine cable protection. Existing legal frameworks derived from telegraph-era conventions that predated modern fiber optic networks and sophisticated sabotage techniques. The technical investigation revealed the acoustic interference equipment had been significantly more sophisticated than initial assessments indicated. The devices operated with adaptive algorithms that adjusted interference patterns based on real-time feedback from cable signal characteristics. Power management systems suggested the equipment could maintain interference for up to 72 hours before requiring recharge. The intelligence community conducted attribution analysis using technical forensics from the recovered interference equipment. Manufacturing techniques, component sourcing, and software characteristics provided indicators about probable origins, but definitive attribution remained elusive. The sophisticated nature suggested state-level resources and expertise. Economic analysts projected long-term market effects beyond the immediate incident. The demonstrated vulnerability created new risk assessments for businesses dependent on internet connectivity. Companies began factoring cable sabotage scenarios into business continuity planning and insurance coverage requirements. Financial markets experienced volatility when details became public. Technology sector stocks declined on infrastructure vulnerability concerns. The market reactions demonstrated that cable security had transitioned from purely technical concern to material business risk affecting investor decisions. The incident accelerated discussions about alternative connectivity technologies. Satellite internet constellations gained attention as potential backup systems, though they lacked capacity to replace cable networks for high-volume transmission. Research programs exploring quantum communication networks received increased funding. Cybersecurity authorities updated threat models to include physical infrastructure attacks enabled by sophisticated technology. The submarine cable interference represented hybrid threats requiring coordination between cybersecurity agencies, naval forces, and telecommunications regulators. International telecommunications organizations established working groups focused on submarine cable resilience, bringing together operators, manufacturers, naval authorities, and cybersecurity experts to develop comprehensive security frameworks. The systems remained stable. Submarine cables transmitted their hundreds of terabits per second. Internet connectivity maintained its global reach. The 48 million people in Northern Europe accessed digital services without awareness of the acoustic interference equipment that could have disrupted their communications for days. Everything worked normally, until the moment it wouldn't.